Hey, worship teams, welcome back. I'm going to take Tony off because he's too big in the screen. Hey, worship teams, great that you're here. Welcome. Those of you on Periscope right here, you're watching us live, and you're watching us live here on YouTube. And wow, what an amazing day. We love all of our Periscope friends. You can see the double camera action happening back and forth. Today is September the 2nd. 2015, and we are so happy that you have chosen to spend this time with us. Out of everything you could be doing, you, for some reason, chose this broadcast and Periscope. So thank you.
Regretting it already.
You expect nothing less from this man right here. Tony, I'm telling you, Tony is the man. I love you, Tony. Awesome. So today, we have a fantastic show for you. We have Sarah Kelly. We're going through the series today and ending it as our season finale. So we are so stoked that you're here on songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. And we are looking at, coming up, the next September the 16th, we have this beautiful man, Rich Kirkpatrick, who looks like between the version of Tim Timmons and Walter White.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you. That was all me. But this is all him.
I accept it.
I know you do. You're beautiful. And then Randy Elrod on September the 30th. Randy Elrod is going to be talking about how to survive in unhealthy church situations. That's going to be a fantastic show. Hey, if you're with us right now, gosh, thank you again for joining us. If you're following us on Facebook, Worship Team Training, Google+, Twitter, @WorshipTT, also on Periscope, Instagram, Pinterest, please hit us up if you have comments, questions, @WorshipTT. Also, be sure to check out our workshops, mentoring, and university at worshipteamtraining.com, and you'll find these fabulous people right here to help you in all of your worship leading needs. They are awesome, and I'm so excited that we can get this show underway. So let's get right to it. Last week we had Chris Vache talking about selecting songs of worship, and today we are talking about how others have unliked our worship leading. How do we deal with that? All right, so be sure, coming up on the next 2 weeks, Tim Timmons will be back with us, and as well as Stephanie Kelly. They'll be joining us next. So today we have our most fabulous guest, and gosh, she's an amazing woman. I've had the opportunity, we've been leading worship together for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, and really? She's awesome. We're helping her train. Thank you, Tony, for that, because Tony was the man to put it together, right there.
Kelly, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I didn't realize it was gonna blossom into that.
Yes. Good. So we're actually working with Sarah Kelly's worship leaders right now with her school, and we're going to start bringing them up through our Saturdays that we're doing, and so to train the worship leaders. So this is really awesome, and her husband Jonas is an awesome, fantastic dude. And so a little bit about Sarah. Sarah is a contemporary Christian artist and worship leader. She leads at the Fellowship of Woodlands in Houston. She's from Rockford, Illinois. She spent a lot of time in California, and she was signed to Goatee Records under a Christian label at EMI. Kelly is a 2-time, I put 4 up there, but that should be 2-time Grammy Award nominee for the albums Take Me Away and Where the Past Meets Today in the category of Best Rock or Rap Gospel Album. Awesome. Her music has been compared to the mainstream of Sheryl Crow. She's got an awesome Janis Joplin voice. Nora Jones, Phil, Sarah McLachlan. She's just, I have to say, even more than that. And she's a ball of energy. I mean, when she gets up in front of people to lead worship, God just tears the roof off. I mean, it's amazing. You can find her at sarahkelly.com and also sarahkellymusicschool.com. And on Twitter, hit her up at sarahkellymusic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the famous, the beautiful Sarah Kelly. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Yay.
Glad you're here. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I'm going to pull you guys a little bit closer. We got people on Periscope watching right now, your every move.
Hi.
And Tony as well. So Tony, don't mess up. And by the way, a big welcome to fantastic host here, Tony Guerrero. How are you today, Tony?
I'm doing great.
You look great.
We're out of time already, aren't we?
We're out of time already. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We're gonna. No, Tony, you're great, man. You doing all right?
I'm doing good.
You look good. That's awesome. And this
All that
beautiful
matters.
man, this beautiful man right here, Miss Talbert, awesome. Rich Kirkpatrick, how are you today, Rich?
I'm doing great today. I got my second cup of coffee.
There you go.
A little early on the West Coast, just so you know, Tony, right?
Everybody have their beverage today of choice. 2 cups, all right. Timmons would here. Timmons would have a bottle of Jack. Well, never mind. But hey, glad that you guys are here. So today's show, they unliked your worship leading. Hey, okay, no problem. So real quick, Periscope, hit type 1 if it's clear, type 2 if it's a bad connection. Type 1 if it's clear, 2 if it's bad. You guys are good here on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and roll. So somebody unlikes your worship leading, or they limit your ministry. Over the past week, we've been having some issues regarding that as we've been talking about this on Periscope, and you can find us at hashtag Periscope at WorshipTT. Awesome conversations, and we wanted to bring it to the surface here a little bit more. Righto. And when the relationship and vision of partnering of worship leading is threatening, if it's threatened, it can either leave people fired up or burned out. So when it comes to the position of your church, how do you serve among those that you may not entirely agree with? And how can you go about loving where you lead despite the limits? Tony, what kind, you've seen a lot of, you mentor and work with a lot of worship leaders. And even in today's time, what do you see, what are the kind of limitations that worship leaders place on themselves or others place on them?
Boy, that's really a big question. I think I could probably, if I were to just make a guess, I would probably say about 90% of the worship leaders I've ever come across would say that they've had limits placed on them, and really, our type of position is one in which we need to offer ourselves to be subjected to, or subjective, what's the word? It's the wrong word. I guess subservient, really, to authority over us, in that our pastor is the one who has been called on to have the big picture of the whole church, of what that church is about, what we're doing, and if we don't fall into his viewpoint, then it's not about whether or not we're being stifled. The fact is, you may be at the wrong church, and you may have taken a job for the wrong reasons. And if you're not in line with your pastor, I mean, the healthiest examples of worship leaders I've ever seen are those that are directly in connection and in agreement with their pastor. So if that's not you, my first suggestion would be you need to reevaluate whether you have this job just because it's a paycheck, or whether you're really there because you support and believe the vision. That's part of it. And then on a simply practical, creative level, the fact is most pastors and church board members and authorities over the worship leader don't understand music and creativity. I won't even say music. They don't understand the creative mind, and really, artistic, creative people think way differently than people who tend to end up in church leadership. Administratively or board members. I mean, it's a whole left brain, right brain thing that happens not only in our bodies but in the church body as well, where you have creative types, you have left brain, right brain people constantly doing this. So our job, we should almost expect that our job will have frustrations. If you go into it expecting that, it sets you up a little better to handle it as they come. But frankly, the Bible's got a whole lot of solutions for you on how to deal with stuff. Matthew 18 is a big one for me on dealing with issues that arise. I'm going to back off and stop because there's really a lot to say about this, so I'll let others speak.
Thank you for that, Tony. Good choice.
We're shutting up. Yeah.
Yeah. Rich, real quick, tell us, what are the kind of limitations that are placed on worship leaders that you see?
Yeah, I think Tony kind of mentioned almost most of that I would have said, especially when it comes to dealing with administrative leaders and the fact that they may not understand what it takes to actually put on a performance. If you're, for instance, touring and you have a set of songs that you've crafted and you can take that, or you've done for 5 years, great, but to get that quality every single week, it takes a lot of work with volunteer musicians. There's limitations put on just from the practical side, from expectations. So, obviously, when expectations don't meet reality, that's where disappointment is. That's a classic definition. And so often what happens is there's this expectation that you're going to sound like a Sarah Cali concert, but you're given like 10 minutes of rehearsal time, or you're given an audio system that's inferior, or you're given a team of volunteers who aren't disciplined because they're not told that they should show up at rehearsals and things like that. So oftentimes, you're facing limitations that are really practical, that have nothing to do with direction of the leadership or the organization. And that's a whole other conversation that we can have too. But so on those things, it's very difficult. And I think, the way to handle a lot of that is you have to lead up and you have to talk to these people that aren't like you. You have to be able to convince them, why it is that, your Mackie mixer that had coffee poured on it and the 2 channels not working isn't going to really help the worship experience when they're wanting Hillsong, stadium sound.
Right. Good. From the technical standpoint, important. Sarah, what is your take on this? What kind of limitations do you see are placed on worship leaders?
What kind of expectations you said? I'm sorry, I just spilled my Coke.
What kind of expectations do you see are placed on worship leaders?
Oh gosh. I mean, boy, they kind of expect us to take a group of people that have played 3 chords in their life and sound like they've spent. It takes 10,000 hours to get good at an instrument, and there's no way around it. There's no McDonald's skill. So I mean, I think that's a big one. Is what Rich was talking about. Also, the expectation to sound like to sound like a Hillsong album when you have a Janis Joplin voice. That's always been a hard one for me. Like you try to sound like these recordings now that are it's impossible to. I'm not a boy. I'm not going to ever sound like a boy. So I mean, these kind of things are always to work within your own human limitations is very hard, and to make people okay with that is hard too. As a girl, I'm sure that's coming from a whole different place. I'm sure there's some women worship leaders out there that are going, I know what you mean. Like, I love it when you're playing with a band and all of a sudden, I mean, they can only play in the key of G, and they don't know what a capo is yet. I mean, these things happen to us, and these pastors and our leaders, they sometimes don't understand exactly how much is working against that sound to be good, that we've already worked miracles. So sometimes I think we can feel underappreciated for sure.
Yeah. Can you name a time, Sarah, when you either led worship or when in your ministry, in any ministry that you've been a part of, can you tell us a time where someone unliked something that you did, and how did you handle that?
Like every day? Seriously, worship is we use music. That means that there's going to be a style. There's going to be elements of yourself in that, and not everyone is going to like what you do. And that's really, I mean, that's hard. That's not fun to have to deal with that. Now, I mean, if your pastor doesn't like what you do, then that's when you have a problem, because that's the guy that's kind of has to have your back. But it's like, I mean, oh my gosh. This is just for instance. I straightened my hair once for a worship set, and I literally, this was near my hometown of Rockford, Illinois, who I love. I love my hometown. They have been the champion hometown of all hometowns. They've championed my career. But this woman came up to me afterwards and was like, Jesus told me to tell you he likes your hair better curly. Okay? I mean, like, these things happen all the time. I mean, Jesus likes my hair better curly. And I believe that. Maybe she was hearing from God because he gave me curly hair, and it was trying too hard to be cool, or I don't know. But I mean, every time someone hears something you say wrong, or doesn't like what you did that day, or I had one lady's like, "You're just a performer. You shouldn't be in worship. You shouldn't, you're too." Oh, what did I have someone? Your rock and roll spirit doesn't belong on a worship stage. I've had that one before. I mean, every time. I mean, I hope this encourages somebody out there that they're not the only ones hearing these things. That hopefully somebody out there is like going, "Oh my gosh, they say it to her too," and she doesn't completely stink at what she does. So maybe I don't completely stink at what I do. I mean, I think you just have to develop a thick skin and just keep going, keep moving forward, and just be like, all right, I'm going to do what God called me to do. I'm going to take the good. I'm going to leave the bad. And if it does come from your leadership, that's when you have to kind of align yourself with it. I mean, you can't. I mean, that's when it's, if your pastor doesn't like what you're doing, that's when you have to kind of, but when you're a person in the crowd, I mean, just keep going forward. What can I say? Just keep moving.
Cool. Thanks for that, Sarah.
Yeah, just let it roll off the back.
So, and speaking of how some have a hard time letting things roll off the back when they're in a ministry. And when it comes to one of our viewers, Original Lady E, who's watching us right now, she asked the question, Tony, how do you stay faithful when you're in a ministry and vision that you, well, let's say the vision, some of the things that you don't agree with, how do you stay faithful in that capacity?
Well, your faithfulness should be to God and to the Word of God, and that's whatever you are staying faithful to in your life needs to be in line with that, whether it's your pastor's vision, your church, your hobbies, your day job, whatever it is that you put your efforts in and you try to stay faithful to, obviously needs to be in line with the Word of God. And so that's the primary thing. And sometimes we can be in our church positions, and when we evaluate ourselves, we find we aren't necessarily in line with the Word of God. So that's the first place to start. Second is what I said earlier, that you, your role as a worship leader on a staff, really any staff member's role, is to, as they say, serve at the pleasure of the king.
Yeah.
Or the pleasure of the president, which,
wow.
Your pastor is the president. Of that organization, and if you're not in line with the pastor's vision, then you should not allow yourself to be in a position where you are a stumbling block to that person. It doesn't mean your pastor's always right, or that you shouldn't speak up or bring things to your pastor or the board's attention when you have, when something is questionable, but be prepared to be answered and find out that maybe you're wrong. I mean, the conversation about things like that is really good and really important, and I think very often we live in our frustration and we start talking amongst ourselves without ever going to the source of your issue. And that's what Matthew 18 is all about. You go to them before you start grumbling to the others. So how to stay faithful, it's really about honoring the Word of God. If you've got an issue, ask the question of the person you should ask the question of, not your friends, not the other members on your team. Go to that person, talk to them, find out if you are really not in line like you think, or they're not in line. Allow them the opportunity to be corrected if that's the case, and allow yourself the opportunity to be corrected. That I guess would be my answer. And I want to answer one other thing, going back to what Sarah was talking about being times when you're unliked. It's not just music and on the platform when you can be unliked. If you're in a staff position, you're in the precarious position of having to love people and yet still challenge and discipline and lay boundaries and expectations on people, and then confront them. And so a lot of times it has nothing to do with your music. For me, my last staff position, I had a senior pastor, then a worship pastor, and then me, and then all the musicians I was over. So I was getting charges from, 2 pastors above me, 1 pastor's above, and then I'm supposed to carry it out to these musicians. Well, when I came to that church, it was at the invitation of a lot of these musicians who I'd known in the music world outside of church, and they sort of started to bring me in. I ended up taking a job there. So these were all my friends before the church. Well, when I had to start handing down decisions that weren't necessarily mine, but which I had to honor, it was amazing to me how suddenly there were times when I was a pariah amongst my friends and these other musicians because of the kind of things that I was hired to come and do and take care of and handle. And there are still residual effects of those relationships now, 10 years later, 5 years later. It's hard. And the things, but I had to honor that. And it wasn't that I disagreed necessarily. Those things had to be done. But there were times I didn't necessarily agree all the way, but I had to carry out my role.
Right. Awesome for that. Thanks, Tony. That's a lot. There's a lot of stories in between us, and it's awesome to hear your heart. Sarah, tell us, how can worship leaders, or leaders for that matter, in any position in ministry, how can they serve joyfully in unlikable circumstances?
Well, first of all, can I just tell you, I have been on the road for, I don't know, I did about 2,000 gigs in 10 years, and I have been to so many churches, and everyone on this show, I've been to your guys' churches, and I've gotten to meet so many amazing worship leaders out there, and I have yet to meet one that's completely happy. Except the ones on the stage, right, of course. But, I'm talking about, everybody, it's a job that has a lot of problems that go with it. Whenever you're working with, you've got this pastor and he needs you, and that's uncomfortable for him because we're artists and we take patience and we're artsy. And we take so much patience. I think we need to realize as artists how much patience we take from, I call them the normals, but the normal people that have both sides of the brain. We take so much patience from them, and we have to give them that benefit of the doubt. Sometimes we're so hard to work with. When I figured that out, I got a lot easier to work with. Because I didn't realize how hard I was to work with, because I was just so taking everything so personal all the time, and trying so hard to be everything to everyone. But we're complicated. Usually, the problem wasn't them; it was me. And I had to take a hard look at myself, at what I was doing wrong. How just because I think something, we're artists. If we think something, we write a song about it, and then we tell the whole world. And we don't get to do that in a church. We don't get to do that. And to come in line and just tell ourselves, okay, here, this is not my job. In my art, that's my job. That's going to make me a great artist. But in a church, that makes me downright hard to work with. And to come under that pastor and to start to realize what your role is not to make that church better. It's to make music and to make better music. It's not to make him a better person. It's not to, they didn't hire you for that. It's to make better music, stay there, and focus all that energy, that artistic energy there, instead of trying to fix everything. And I'm only just speaking from experience. I'm speaking from my own. If I can shave 10 years off of your learning curve, instead of me trying to take on every problem in a place and fix everything, just be a great musician. Do a great job for the guy, and then you'll have a job forever.
Yeah.
I think that's. I would like to
Go ahead, Rich.
concur with that, because I think a lot of people are frustrated is they haven't put in the hours for their craft enough to be able to have facility to have options for the pastor.
Right.
You know, they can't take a group of varied musicians where you have a professional and a semi-pro and a guy who knows 4 chords and teach that guy a 4th chord or 5th chord, and then, you know, arrange music in keys that people can sing. There's a lot of things that I think, you know, from just the joy aspect of the job itself, that there's a misunderstanding from leadership of who they hire. They hire kind of what looks right, as opposed to a person that can lead right for them. And then, you know, so also I think the way to stay happy is I learned this the hard way, because, you know, I'm a little feisty of a person, and I've been in 20 years of full-time worship ministry, and I love my pastors, and some of them I've probably caused a lot of stress. In fact, I know I have. But, you know, there's the filter is this, and I talk to young worship leaders all the time. There is a filter of your conscience and your preference. And so when you face an issue as an artist, is this my preference or is this my conscience? And oftentimes what happens in a relationship is early on we start fighting all these fights about our preferences as if they were conscience. And then when a conscience issue comes up, we have no cards to play. And we have no voice in the situation. And so oftentimes what I've learned is that you have to separate that, because we're there to serve. I think even an artist, you know, I know Tony and Sarah have a bigger platform out there for even in the secular world. You're there to serve whoever it is. And an artist's role is not to serve themselves. The joy comes when people engage in what you do. It could be the greatest thing. It should be, you know, that you're happy with it and your audience resonates with it, and you can make if you can make a living doing that, that's money. Church musicians have an unrealistic expectation. They walk into a venue that has a better sound system than any club that they're going to play in, because they haven't played in clubs before. Yeah. And I had a Grammy winner in a church I was at, and he walked in, you know, volunteering with us, and he goes, "This is better than any place we play usually." And he was a high-level person, and so. And it really taught me that that's the issue. So we have entitlement on our side, and we have to, though, back to that, preferences versus conscience. So if I have a conscience issue, then I can have a different conversation. If it's a preference issue, I can say, you know, I really prefer this, but is that helpful? You know, is this preference helpful or not?
Yeah,
that's good.
Good. That's
hey,
good.
Let me add one quick thing.
Okay, one quick thing.
How dare we expect that doing the work of the Lord should be easy for us?
That's a great point.
Like for us to think that we could do legitimate battle with Satan and have it not come with headaches that we should be
no way, dude.
The responsibility of. Like, come on.
There's no way. There's no way. That's a great word, Tony.
So we need to expect that.
Yeah.
And what is expecting it means? It means, you know, you put on the full armor of God daily as you approach your job.
I would say though, just
wow.
I would say though that there are times when, you know, we have this alpha leader culture sometimes that's infiltrated the church, where a lot of people will get hurt. A lot of artists and worship leaders get hurt legitimately, and don't have the faculty. You know, they pray and they're earnest with God, and there comes a point where, our maturity has to get to a point as leaders. This is the thing I had to learn, is it's not just as an artist. If you're in front of people in a church, you have to think like a leader, which means you have to know when it's too much for you. Maybe a lot of it's just laws of physics. You can't accomplish what's being put on the table, and even though you know, and I've learned this, that sometimes leadership, the limitation is they don't see physics as a limitation. Which means budget or time or effort. The 10,000 hours that Sarah mentioned, that alone. Developing peoples, I think, really is the conscience issue I have. Is, are we going to develop people, including ourselves?
All right, good. Guys, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, and because we're going to be talking more about development tomorrow. at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time with this awesome dude in the whole wide world, Tony Guerrero, please go to worshipteamtraining.com/events. Sign up for September the 2nd, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time webinar, and it will be up there forever, by the way. So if you can't make it, you want to get it on Friday or next week, it will still be there. You can still purchase anytime. But this guy's got a lot of good stuff. We're going to go back to Rich. Rich is also going to join us in the next month coming up. Well, this month in September, but also another webinar from Rich. But this beautiful person, Sarah, will you take us home? What, and all of what we talked about this morning, what's the one thing that you keep coming back to?
You know, just don't take yourself too seriously. It's very easy for us as musicians to take everything so to heart. Especially for my friends out there who are in their 20s and early 30s. Man, you're going to figure out you did most of it wrong. You're going to figure that out. There's no way to avoid this. You're going to figure out that everything you're doing now is pretty much going to be in your to learn from path for the future. So just keep learning, keep being awesome, and do not, hear me, do not burn bridges. Do not burn bridges. You will wish they weren't burned later, and you're going to figure out a lot of times you were the one that was wrong. And that's hard to hear right now, but it is what it is. It is going to happen. So that's what I keep coming back to.
Wow, awesome. Sarah, we love you. You have so many awesome things to say, and just the worship leaders that you and Jonas are training. Jonas, love you, dude. I know you're there listening. He's there in the room, Jonas.
Get over here.
Handling the camera right now. We say hello.
Right here.
Oh, we want to say hi at first. Awesome.
He looks like Lutheran Jesus. You know the Lutheran.
Very good. Is that LCMS or EV, the EV one, the EV side? ELCA. Yeah. I think he's LCMS looking, I'd say. You guys are awesome. Sarah, we got to have you back. I mean, we're gonna have you back anyway, but I'm thinking maybe like late October or November. Does that sound good, you guys?
Love it. I love you guys. This is
People on Periscope love it. So you say bye-bye at the Periscope, friends. Awesome. And thank you again for joining us today, Sarah. It's a pleasure, as always.
Awesome.
And it's been most awesome leading worship. I just had to tell real quick, we were doing the song Open Up the Heavens, and just the band was really, really tight. And I looked back, and as Sarah was leading the song, I looked back, and there was that moment of worship, where time stands still. And it's like, God is right there. And she hit, it was the high note coming out of the bridge back into the chorus. And on that high note, we both looked at each other, and it was like this, wow. Like everyone in the room was just singing. And it was like that, you just wanted to take a picture of that moment just for that 1 second. God was just being honored. It was so awesome leading with you, Sarah.
Thank you. It was so awesome to lead with you, too.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, it was great. So thank you. Rich, as always, thank you for being here today.
You are so welcome.
And Rich is coming back on the 16th of September. So be sure to tune in for that, because we're going to have some more hard-hitting topics, as well as Randy Elrod that's going to be with us as well. So you can't miss that. And, of course, this man right here, Tony. Thank you again, as always.
Thank you. Great to see you, Rich and Sarah.
Yay.
Awesome. So we say good night, good luck, God bless you. Join us at the Worship Team Training webinar tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, worshipteamtraining.com/events. Thank you, Periscope, Mindy, all you guys, Dan Lay. You guys are great. And we'll see you back the next time. So peace, and may God's blessings flow to you and your worship team.